Number 1. Dorothea Puente. She looked like your grandma. Polite, soft-spoken, baked cookies, had gray hair and oversized glasses. But Dorothea Puente wasn't just running a boarding house in Sacramento. She was running a killing machine. Between 1982 and 1988, she murdered her elderly tenants, cashed their social security checks, and buried their bodies in her backyard. Most of her victims were vulnerable, people with disabilities, substance abuse issues, or mental health challenges. She lured them in with promises of safe housing and meals. But once they moved in, they were never seen alive again. Her method was simple: sedate, kill, bury, and cash the checks. She kept doing it over and over. Neighbors thought she was a kind landlady who helped people no one else wanted. She even donated to local charities. But suspicions grew when a social worker began asking questions about a missing tenant. That's when the digging began. What police found would send shockwaves across the nation. 7 bodies were unearthed from the yard. Puente didn't panic. She calmly served investigators tea while they searched. She even fled town briefly but was captured in Los Angeles. In court, she denied everything. But the evidence, the shallow graves, the bank records, the drug prescriptions, told another story. Her trial became one of California's most bizarre. The jury heard testimony about arsenic, sedatives, and forged signatures. Puente's defense tried to paint her as a misunderstood old woman. But the facts were undeniable. She was a serial killer hiding in plain sight. She was convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Even behind bars, she maintained her innocence, writing poetry, granting interviews, and insisting she was a victim of a smear campaign. Dorothea Puente died in prison in 2011, but her house still stands, and some say the yard where she buried her victims still carries a chill. Her case is a terrifying reminder that some of the deadliest predators don't look like monsters, they look like grandmothers. Number 2. Dana Sue Gray. She wore scrubs, smiled at her patients, and had a calm demeanor. But in 1994, Dana Sue Gray, a licensed nurse, became one of California's most twisted female serial killers. Her motive? Money. Her victims? Elderly women who were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Gray had recently lost her job and was drowning in debt. Rather than work harder or seek help, she chose a different route, one soaked in blood. She targeted women in their 50s, 60s, and 80s, all of whom were kind, trusting, and lived alone. Her plan was chilling: kill them, steal their cards, and go on shopping sprees. One of her first known victims was an 86-year-old woman found strangled and bludgeoned in her own home. Within hours, Gray used her credit card to buy expensive perfume, clothes, and meals. Another woman was found dead in her bedroom, her purse missing. Again, Gray used the stolen funds for personal indulgence. She wasn't subtle. Surveillance footage, receipts, and timelines eventually pointed straight to her. When investigators closed in, they discovered she had planned more killings and had only been stopped because one of her victims survived and gave a description. Gray was arrested and charged with multiple counts of first-degree murder. Her trial revealed a disturbing lack of remorse. She smiled during questioning and described her crimes with eerie calmness. The prosecution described her as someone who saw human lives as price tags. She pled guilty to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to multiple life terms. She remains incarcerated in a California state prison. Dana Sue Gray's case is a rare look into what happens when greed overrides humanity. When a nurse, trusted to save lives, chooses instead to destroy them. Her story is a chilling reminder that killers don't always break in. Sometimes they walk right through the front door with a smile. Number 3. Theresa Knorr. Theresa Knorr didn't stalk strangers or lure victims from the street. Her victims were her own daughters, and the house where it all happened looked like any other on a quiet Sacramento street. But behind closed doors, it became a prison of fear, torture, and death. What she did to her children goes beyond abuse. It was a reign of terror that ended in unthinkable horror. Theresa had 6 children. She was volatile, paranoid, and believed she was under constant threat from demonic forces and imagined betrayals. She became obsessed with the idea that her daughters were witches, or that they were trying to seduce men and ruin her life. Any perceived disobedience became a justification for violence. And the violence wasn't occasional, it was constant. She beat them, starved them, and even forced her sons to participate in punishing their sisters. But her brutality reached its peak with her daughters, Sheila and Susan. At one point, Theresa shot Susan in the back, then locked her in a closet for weeks to heal on her own. The girl eventually died in agony. When her body began to rot, Theresa ordered the others to help her burn it in the woods. But the nightmare didn't end there. Sheila became the next target. She was locked in a closet, deprived of food and water, and eventually died of starvation and neglect. Once again, Theresa ordered her body dumped like garbage, and through it all, she maintained her innocence to the outside world, even convincing schools and neighbors that her daughters had simply run away. The other children lived in fear, too traumatized to speak out. It wasn't until years later, in 1993, that the truth finally came out when her youngest daughter broke her silence. The details she gave investigators were so horrifying that officers initially struggled to believe them. But after digging deeper, the truth emerged, and it stunned the nation. Theresa Knorr was arrested and charged with 2 counts of murder. In court, she remained emotionless. Her surviving children testified against her, detailing years of psychological and physical torment. The judge didn't hesitate. Knorr was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms. She remains in prison, with no possibility of parole. Her case remains one of the most disturbing examples of maternal cruelty in American history. She didn't kill for money or revenge. She did it out of twisted delusion, control, and unchecked rage. And she used motherhood as a weapon, proving that sometimes the most terrifying evil wears the face of family. Number 4. Cynthia Coffman. Cynthia Coffman wasn't born a killer. At least that's what some argue. But when she crossed paths with James Marlowe, a convicted felon and self-proclaimed white supremacist, something dark was triggered. What followed was a violent spree across California in 1986, where robbery and domination escalated into abduction, torture, and murder. Coffman and Marlowe were a volatile pair. Both had criminal records. Both had a history of drug use and emotional instability. But when they got together, their crimes took on a new, terrifying dimension. They weren't just stealing, they were hunting. Their victims were young women, chosen seemingly at random, and the couple's methods were beyond cruel. One of their first known victims was Sandra Neary, a 32-year-old woman abducted outside a shopping center in Costa Mesa. Her body was later found in a remote field, hands bound, strangled with a cord. Then came Pamela Simmons and Linnell Murray, both murdered in similarly brutal fashion. The pattern was emerging: lure, abduct, torture, and kill. Police were scrambling to connect the dots. Eventually, fingerprints, witness sightings, and surveillance led to their arrest. What followed was a disturbing investigation that revealed just how involved Coffman had been. While she initially claimed she was forced to participate, the evidence and her own confessions told a different story. At trial, prosecutors painted Coffman as an active participant, not a passive victim. They argued she not only helped plan the crimes, but took pleasure in them. The defense tried to argue brainwashing and battered woman syndrome. But the jury wasn't convinced. She was convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to death, becoming one of the few women on California's death row. Coffman remains behind bars, her death sentence still intact. In interviews, she has expressed remorse, but also continues to shift blame. Whether she was led astray or always had darkness within her remains a subject of debate. But the victims and their families live with the consequences either way. Her story is a reminder that evil can be contagious, and that some partnerships become deadly. Together, Coffman and Marlowe left a trail of pain, and alone, she continues to sit in a cell, waiting for a sentence that may never be carried out, but will never be lifted. What do these women have in common? They weren't hiding in the shadows. They were mothers, nurses, landladies, girlfriends. They walked among us, smiling, blending in, and pretending to care. But behind the smiles were cold intentions. Behind the ordinary exteriors were some of the most brutal crimes ever committed in California's history. These weren't moments of madness. They were premeditated, deliberate, and in some cases, repeated. The kind of evil you don't expect from women. And yet, that's exactly why it shocks us so deeply. Because when trust is broken by someone who's supposed to protect, the betrayal cuts deeper. California may be known for its sunshine and dreams, but these cases reveal the shadows that sometimes grow behind closed doors. From Sacramento to Costa Mesa, from hospitals to homes, these women left behind victims, scars, and legacies of horror that will never be forgotten. Evil doesn't always look like what we expect. It can wear perfume, carry a purse, and call itself mom. These are the killers who prove that horror has many faces, and some of them are female. Let us know in the comments, which of these cases shocked you the most? Do you think justice was truly served? And are there other female killers in California you think should be on this list? Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. We bring you real cases, unfiltered truth, and the most chilling stories from across America. This is where justice meets the shadows. We'll see you in the next case. Until then, stay aware, stay safe, and remember, not every monster looks like one.